My family decided I'd host every holiday because I don't have kids and have the space. I found my mother's handwritten invoice in my bedroom dresser drawer, not on the kitchen counter, not in my mailbox, in my private dresser, underneath my socks, where she'd been snooping while I was at the grocery store buying the 23-pound turkey she'd texted me to get. The invoice was itemized on her personal stationery, the cream-colored cards with her initials in rose gold, and it listed every holiday gathering I'd hosted over the past 4 years with a dollar amount next to each one. Thanksgiving 2020, $340. Christmas 2020, $275. Easter 2021, $180. The total at the bottom, circled 3 times in red ink, read $6,890. Below it, in her precise cursive, family coordinator fee, $2,000. Total owed to hosts, $8,890. Payment plans available. I stood there, holding her invoice in my kitchen at 3:17 p.m. on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, with a defrosting turkey on my counter and 16 people expected in less than 24 hours, and I started laughing. Because what else do you do when you realize your own mother has been billing you for the privilege of being used? I need to back up. My name's Nathan, I'm 34, and I bought my house 3 years ago in a suburb outside Portland. It's a 4-bedroom colonial with an actual dining room, a backyard, and, this matters, enough parking for 8 cars. I'm a software engineer, I work remotely, I've never been married, and I don't have kids. These facts, apparently, made me the perfect target. It started innocently enough. October 2020, my sister Vanessa called and said Mom's kitchen was being renovated and could we possibly do Thanksgiving at my place? Just this once. She'd help cook. Everyone would pitch in. I said sure. I liked my family back then. I had a house with space. Why not? That Thanksgiving, 14 people showed up. Vanessa helped for about 40 minutes before disappearing to watch football with her husband Greg. My other sister Olivia arrived with her 3 kids and immediately asked where the craft supplies were because she forgot to pack activities. My brother Keith showed up empty-handed and drunk by 2 p.m. My parents arrived last, with my mother critiquing my table settings before her coat was off. I cooked a 20-pound turkey, 3 sides, 2 pies, and spent $340 on groceries. My family ate, complimented the food, trashed my house, and left by 8. I spent 3 hours cleaning. The next morning, my mother called and said how wonderful it was, and how much easier it was than hosting at her place, and wouldn't it be nice if I did Christmas too? I was still riding the high of successful hosting. I said yes. Christmas was worse. 20 people. I spent $400. My nephew broke a lamp. Someone's kid vomited on my bathroom rug. Keith got in a screaming match with his girlfriend in my driveway at 11 p.m., and my neighbors complained. When I suggested Easter might be at someone else's house, my mother's voice went cold. Nathan, you have the space. Vanessa has a tiny apartment. Olivia's house is chaos with the kids. Keith lives with his girlfriend in that awful rental. Your father and I are getting older. Hosting is too stressful. You're the logical choice. The logical choice. That phrase became her weapon. Easter 2021 came and I hosted. Memorial Day I hosted. 4th of July I hosted. Labor Day I hosted. Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's Eve. My house became the default venue for every family gathering, and somewhere along the way, hosting became servicing. My family stopped asking and started informing. Text messages would arrive. Thanksgiving at your place. We're bringing 6 people. Christmas Eve at yours. We'll arrive at 4. The contributions they'd promised that first Thanksgiving evaporated. Vanessa stopped helping cook. Olivia stopped bringing anything except her kids and their chaos. Keith started inviting his friends. My parents began arriving a day early to help prep, which meant my mother rearranging my furniture and my father critiquing my lawn. I was buying all the food, doing all the cooking, all the cleaning, and somehow I'd become the family servant. When I tried to push back, gently, because I still loved these people, my mother would sigh and say, Nathan, you're being selfish. Family takes care of family. You have the space and the time. What else are you doing with your life? What else was I doing with my life? That question haunted me because the answer was, apparently nothing that mattered to them. I had a career, hobbies, friends, a life I'd built. But because there was no wife, no kids, no socially recognizable achievements, my time was considered empty, available, free for the taking. The breaking point should have come in July 2023, when Olivia informed me she was hosting her daughter's birthday party at my house, without asking, because her backyard was too small. 30 screaming children destroyed my house. I wasn't invited to participate. I was the venue. I should have said no then. Instead, I cleaned up the destruction, patched the hole some kid kicked in my drywall, and said nothing. Because that's what I'd been trained to do. The real breaking point came 3 months later, on a Wednesday afternoon in October, when I found that invoice in my dresser. I read it 3 times. The amounts were accurate. She'd tracked every gathering, every holiday, every birthday party I'd hosted. But the numbers weren't estimates. They were calculations. Professional-grade accounting of what she believed hosting had cost her when she used to do it, before they designated me the family coordinator. The line item that made my hands shake was the one at the bottom. Family coordinator fee, $2,000. She believed I owed her $2,000 for the privilege of being voluntold into hosting, for having my boundaries demolished and my space invaded, for spending my money, My time, my energy on gatherings I'd stopped enjoying 18 months ago. The invoice wasn't even addressed to me. It was addressed to whom it may concern, as if she'd written it as a template. As if she'd planned to present it to me formally. As if this was a business transaction and I was the debtor. I sat on my bed holding that invoice and something inside me crystallized. This wasn't family. This was exploitation with a biological connection. I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through texts. The pattern was obvious once I looked for it. Every gathering announced, never requested. Every contribution promised, never delivered. Every boundary I tried to set, dismissed. Can someone else host Christmas? Response. Nathan, don't be difficult. I need help with Thanksgiving prep. Response. You're so good at this, we'd just get in the way. I can't host Easter, I have plans. Response. Cancel them. Family comes first. I screenshot every conversation going back 2 years. Then I opened my banking app and calculated my actual costs. $8,200 in groceries and supplies over 4 years. The invoice total was close, but she'd lowballed it. She'd also somehow decided I owed her money for work she was no longer doing. My phone rang. Mom. I stared at her name on the screen and let it go to voicemail. She called again. I declined it. A text arrived. Did you get the turkey? Vanessa wants to know if you're making that cranberry sauce she likes. Also, Olivia is bringing 8 people now instead of 5. Her husband's parents are joining. Set 3 extra places. I looked at that text, looked at the invoice still in my other hand, looked at the defrosting turkey on my counter, and I made a decision that would detonate my family like a controlled demolition. I texted back, no. Just that. 1 word. 3 letters. The phone rang immediately. I answered. My mother's voice was sharp. What do you mean, no? I said. I mean, no. I'm not hosting Thanksgiving. Silence. Then, Nathan, everyone is expecting to come to your house tomorrow. You can't just cancel. I could hear the disbelief. The audacity of my refusal was incomprehensible to her. I said, I found your invoice, Mom. In my dresser, where you left it while snooping through my things. The silence stretched longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice had shifted to defensive. That was just, I was calculating what hosting used to cost me. For reference, I wasn't going to actually give it to you. I said, it was in my dresser, under my socks. You were in my private bedroom, going through my private things, while I was shopping for groceries you demanded I buy. She recovered quickly. Don't be dramatic. I was looking for a phone charger, and the invoice is just documentation. You're taking it out of context. I said, what context makes billing me for family gatherings acceptable? She said, you're being unreasonable. This is what family does. We're coming tomorrow. I said, no, you're not. I'm canceling Thanksgiving. I hung up. My hands were shaking so hard I dropped the phone. I'd never hung up on my mother in my life. The phone exploded. Calls from Vanessa, calls from Olivia, calls from Keith, texts flooding in. What's going on? Mom says you're canceling Thanksgiving? This is ridiculous. You can't do this to the family. I silenced my phone and sat in the sudden quiet of my house. The turkey sat on the counter, slowly defrosting, a 23-pound symbol of expectations I'd carried for years. I walked over, picked it up, and put it in my freezer. Then I pulled out my laptop and did something I should have done years ago. I started documenting everything. Every text message, every holiday, every cost, every boundary violation, every instance of my family treating my home like a free event venue and me like unpaid staff. I created a spreadsheet. Dates, events, costs, attendance, contributions from others. The numbers were devastating. 4 years, 32 gatherings, $8,200 spent. Total contributions from my family, $340. 1 pie from Vanessa for Christmas 2021. 1 bottle of wine from Keith for New Year's 2022. Nothing else. They'd treated my generosity like an infinite resource and my boundaries like suggestions. My phone kept buzzing. I ignored it. At 6 p.m., someone knocked on my door. I looked through the window. Vanessa. I didn't answer. She knocked harder. Nathan, I know you're in there. Your car's in the driveway. Open up. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. She looked furious. What the hell is going on? Mom is hysterical. You can't just cancel Thanksgiving the day before. I said, I can, and I did. She said, everyone already made plans. The kids are excited. You're being selfish. That word. Selfish. The same word my mother used. I said, Vanessa, when was the last time you contributed anything to a holiday I hosted? She blinked. What? I said, money, food, help, anything. When? She stammered, I help cook. I said, you helped for 40 minutes 4 years ago. Name one other time. She couldn't. Her face flushed. This isn't about money. I said, you're right. It's about respect and boundaries and the fact that our mother was in my bedroom going through my dresser without permission. Vanessa's anger flickered. She what? I showed her the invoice. Watched her face change as she read it. This is all Nathan. This is weird. Why would she? I said. I don't know. But I know I'm done being the family's free labor. Vanessa's expression shifted from anger to something like guilt. Look, I didn't realize. I thought you liked hosting. I said, I did. The first time. When everyone promised to help and contribute and it was supposed to be shared. But it's not shared. It's not family. It's me serving you. She was quiet. Then, so what do you want? I said, I want you to leave. I'm not hosting tomorrow. Figure something else out. She left. The phone calls continued into the night. My father called, using his disappointed voice. Son, your mother is upset. Whatever happened, you need to apologize and fix this. I said, I'm not apologizing for having boundaries. He said, you're tearing this family apart over nothing. I hung up on him too. Thursday morning, Thanksgiving Day. My phone had 83 missed calls and 46 text messages. I read through them over coffee in my quiet house. The messages ranged from angry, you're destroying this family, to manipulative, the kids are crying, how can you do this to them, to threatening, don't expect to be invited to anything ever again. That last one came from Keith, who'd never hosted anything in his life. I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. My house was clean. My schedule was empty. I didn't have to cook for 16 people or clean up after them or pretend to enjoy conversations with relatives who treated me like a servant. I made myself pancakes, watched football, and at 2 p.m., my doorbell rang. I looked through the window and saw my entire family on my porch. All 16 of them. My mother was in front, holding a store-bought pie, a prop. I opened the door but stood in the frame, blocking entry. My mother's smile was strained. Nathan, honey, we came to talk. Behind her, Olivia's kids were running on my lawn. Vanessa looked uncomfortable. Keith looked angry. My father looked stern. I said, there's nothing to talk about. My mother said, of course there is. You're upset, and we want to understand why. Her tone was the one she used on children having tantrums. Condescending, placating. I said, I told you why. I'm not hosting anymore. She said, but we're here now. The children were expecting. I said, the children will survive one Thanksgiving without destroying my house. Olivia's face went red. Excuse me? I said, your son kicked a hole in my drywall during his birthday party that you hosted here without asking me. You never apologized. You never paid for repairs. You never even acknowledged it happened. Olivia sputtered, he's a child. Accidents happen. I said, and when accidents happen, parents take responsibility. You didn't. My mother intervened. Nathan, this isn't about drywall. This is about family. We're here because we love you and we want to work this out. I said, you're here because you don't have anywhere else to go and you're used to using my house. Keith stepped forward. You know what? You're being a spoiled brat. We come together as a family and you're throwing a fit because what? You have to buy some groceries? I pulled out my phone and showed him the spreadsheet. $8,200 over 4 years, 32 events. Your contribution? 0. He squinted at the screen. You kept track? That's psychotic. I said, what's psychotic is expecting someone to fund and host your entire social calendar and then calling them spoiled when they say no. My father's voice boomed. Enough. Nathan, you will apologize to your mother and you will let us in. This behavior is unacceptable. I looked at my father. This man who'd taught me to stand up for myself, to set boundaries, to not let people take advantage of me, who was now demanding I let people take advantage of me because they were family. I said, no. His face darkened. What did you say? I said no. You're not coming in. I'm not hosting. I'm not apologizing. And if you don't leave my property in the next 60 seconds, I'm calling the police for trespassing. My mother gasped. You wouldn't. I pulled up the keypad on my phone. Try me. For 10 seconds, nobody moved. Then Vanessa touched Mom's arm. Come on, let's go. My mother's face was a portrait of shock and rage. You're going to regret this, Nathan. Family is everything. Without us, you have nothing. I said, I have peace. That's more than I've had in 4 years. They left. I watched them pile into their cars and drive away. Then I closed my door, locked it, and sat on my couch in the silence. The aftermath was immediate and vicious. I was removed from the family group chat. My mother left a voicemail saying I was no longer welcome at her house until you come to your senses and apologize for your cruel behavior. Vanessa sent a long text about how I'd embarrassed her in front of her husband and kids. Olivia posted a vague Facebook status about toxic family members who put themselves first. Keith called me a selfish bastard in a voicemail that was 50% slurred cursing. I sat with all of it and waited to feel guilty. The guilt never came. Instead, I felt clarity. This wasn't about one Thanksgiving. This was about years of conditioning. My family had systematically trained me to believe my worth came from service, that boundaries were selfishness, that saying no was betrayal. They'd taken advantage of my generosity until there was nothing generous about it anymore. It was just extraction. On Friday, I called my best friend Lucas. He'd been watching this dynamic for years, biting his tongue because you don't trash talk someone's family. When I told him what happened, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Thank God. I said, "What?" He said, "Nathan, watching them use you has been painful. Every holiday, you'd tell me how stressed you were, how much money you spent, how exhausted you were, and then you'd do it again. I didn't know how to tell you that your family was treating you like garbage." I said, "Why didn't you say something?" He said, "Would you have listened?" He was right. I wouldn't have. I was too deep in it, too conditioned to see it. Lucas said, "What you did took guts. Most people never escape that kind of family dynamic." I said, "I feel like I should feel worse than I do." He said, "That's because you're supposed to feel guilty. They trained you to. But guilt requires wrongdoing, and you didn't do anything wrong." That conversation unlocked something. I started reading about family dynamics, emotional manipulation, enmeshment. I found a therapist, Dr. Angela Reeves, licensed for 15 years, specializing in family systems. In our first session, I told her everything. The holidays, the expectations, the invoice, the confrontation. She listened without interrupting, taking notes. When I finished, she said, "What you're describing is a parentified dynamic where adult children are expected to meet their parents' needs rather than the reverse. Your family assigned you a role, the provider, and punished you for stepping out of it." I said, "But they're my family. Shouldn't I want to help them?" She said, "Help is consensual. What you've described is coercion. There's a difference between choosing to contribute to family gatherings and being forced to fund and host them under threat of rejection." I said, "Is it normal that I don't feel guilty?" She smiled. "It's healthy. Guilt is what keeps people trapped in these dynamics. The fact that you're not feeling it means you're seeing clearly." Dr. Reeves recommended I maintain the boundaries I'd set and prepare for escalation. When people lose access to what they believe they're entitled to, they get desperate. Your family will likely increase pressure before they accept the new dynamic. She was right. The week after Thanksgiving, my mother showed up at my workplace. I work remotely, but she somehow found out I was meeting a client at a coffee shop downtown. She coincidentally appeared, sat down at my table, and tried to initiate a conversation in front of my client. I excused myself, told her to leave, and when she refused, I stood up and walked out. My client followed, looking bewildered. Later, he sent an email. "Is everything okay?" That seemed intense. I apologized and explained briefly that I was dealing with family boundary issues. He was understanding, but I was mortified. My mother had brought her manipulation campaign to my professional life. The harassment escalated. Olivia started sending her kids to my house after school, dropping them off without warning and driving away. The first time I called her and said, "Come get your children." She said, "I have an appointment. You're home. Just watch them for an hour." I said, "No." She said, "What am I supposed to do?" I said, "That's not my problem." I called my father, told him what was happening. He said, "Just watch the kids, Nathan. What's the harm?" I said, "The harm is their mother using me as free childcare without my consent." He sighed. "You've changed. You used to care about family." I hung up and called Olivia back. "You have 30 minutes to get your kids or I'm calling CPS for child abandonment." She came back in 20, screaming at me in my driveway about what a horrible uncle I was. Her kids watched from the car, confused. I felt terrible for them. They were being weaponized in an adult conflict they didn't understand. Keith showed up drunk at 11 p.m. on a Saturday, pounding on my door and yelling about what a traitor I was. I called the police. When they arrived, Keith was still there, sitting on my porch steps, incoherent. Officer Jameson Hayes, badge number 2891, took my statement. I explained the situation, family harassment following a boundary dispute. Keith was arrested for public intoxication and disturbing the peace. My mother called me the next morning, furious. "You had your brother arrested." I said, "He was drunk and trespassing. I protected my property." She said, "He needed help, not handcuffs." I said, "Then you should have helped him instead of enabling him to harass me." She hung up. The family group chat, the one I'd been removed from, apparently exploded with messages about my cruelty. Vanessa screenshot them and sent them to me, maybe thinking I'd feel guilty. Instead, I felt validated. Every message was about what I owed them, how I'd failed them, how selfish I was. Not one person asked if I was okay. If this story keeps your interest, please subscribe to get more stories like this. Christmas approached. I ignored every hint, every message, every manipulation attempt. My mother sent a card. "Despite everything, you're still my son. We'll be gathering at Olivia's this year since you've made yourself unavailable. The door is open if you choose to join us and apologize." I didn't respond. Christmas Day, I volunteered at a homeless shelter, serving meals to people who said thank you and meant it. It was the best Christmas I'd had in years. New Year's came and went quietly. Then, in mid-January, I got a call from an unknown number. I answered. A woman's voice. "Mr. Reeves, this is Patricia Donnelly. I'm a social worker with the county. I need to ask you some questions about a report we received." My stomach dropped. "What kind of report?" She said, "A family member has filed a wellness concern claiming you're experiencing a mental health crisis and may be a danger to yourself or others. I need to conduct a wellness check. I sat down. This was a new level. Someone in my family, I didn't know who, had called social services and filed a false report to weaponize the system against me. Patricia Donnelly arrived at my house an hour later with a police officer. She was professional, calm, thorough. She asked about my mental state, my living conditions, my employment, my family relationships. I told her everything. The years of hosting, the financial exploitation, the boundary violations, the harassment. I showed her the invoice, the spreadsheets, the text messages, the police report from Keith's arrest. She took notes, asked clarifying questions, looked around my clean, well-maintained house. After 40 minutes, she said, "Mr. Reeves, there's clearly a family conflict here, but I see no evidence of a mental health crisis or danger. The report appears to be unfounded." I said, "Can you tell me who filed it?" She said, "I can't disclose that, but I can note in my report that the claim was unsubstantiated and appears to have been made in bad faith." After she left, I called Dr. Reeves, told her what happened. She was quiet, then said, "This is abuse. What your family is doing, the harassment, the manipulation, the false reports, this is coordinated abuse designed to force you into compliance." I said, "What do I do?" She said, "You document everything. You consider a restraining order, and you accept that these people may never respect your boundaries, which means you have to enforce them legally." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that social worker in my house, questioning my sanity because someone in my family had lied to authorities. It was meant to intimidate me, to show me they could weaponize institutions against me. It had the opposite effect. It showed me how far they'd go, which meant I needed to go further. I hired a lawyer, Rebecca Thornton, family law specialist, 15 years of practice. I brought her everything, the invoice, the spreadsheets, the texts, the police report, the social services report, documentation of the workplace harassment. She read through it all, methodical and focused. When she finished, she looked up and said, "You have grounds for restraining orders against multiple family members. Harassment, trespassing, filing false reports. This is a pattern of behavior designed to coerce and intimidate." I said, "They're my family." She said, "That doesn't give them the right to abuse you. In fact, it makes it worse because they're exploiting the relationship." I said, "If I file restraining orders, there's no going back." She said, "Mr. Reeves, do you want to go back?" I thought about that question. Did I want to go back to hosting holidays I didn't enjoy, spending money I didn't want to spend, having my boundaries ignored and my home invaded? Did I want to go back to being the family servant, valued only for what I provided? The answer was simple. No. Rebecca filed the paperwork. Restraining orders against my mother for the workplace harassment and false social services report. Against Keith for trespassing and the drunken incident. Against Olivia for using her children as weapons and the attempted child abandonment. The court dates were set for late February. I knew once those orders were served, the family would detonate. I was right. My mother received her paperwork first. She called me, and for the first time I heard something I'd never heard in her voice. Fear. "Nathan, what have you done?" I said, "I've protected myself." She said, "A restraining order? Against your own mother? Do you know what this will do to me? To my reputation?" I said, "You should have thought about that before you filed a false report with social services." She gasped. "How did you—" I said, "The social worker told me enough, and my lawyer says filing false reports is a crime." She was silent. Then, "I was worried about you. You were acting erratic." I said a boundary. That's not erratic. That's healthy." She shifted tactics. "Nathan, please. We can fix this. We can go to family therapy. We can work this out. You don't need to involve the courts." I said, "You involved the courts when you filed a false report. You escalated this. I'm just responding." She started crying. "You're my son. I love you. I only wanted what was best." I said, "What you wanted was control, and when you lost it, you tried to destroy me." I hung up. My hands were shaking, but I didn't call back. Vanessa called next. "Nathan, you need to drop this. Do you know what restraining orders do to people? Mom can't go near your work. Keith could lose his job if his employer finds out. Olivia is humiliated." I said, "Good." Vanessa was shocked into silence. Then, "That's cruel." I said, "What's cruel is spending 4 years using someone and then punishing them for saying no." She said, "We never—" I said, "Yes, you did, all of you, and now you're facing consequences." The court hearing was surreal. I sat with Rebecca in a small courtroom while a judge reviewed the evidence. My mother had hired a lawyer who tried to paint me as unstable, using the fact that I'd suddenly cut off family as evidence of mental problems. Rebecca countered with the documentation, the years of financial records, the pattern of escalating demands, the harassment, the false report. The judge, Honorable Stephen Keller, 22 years on the bench, listened to both sides and reviewed the evidence. Then he looked at my mother's lawyer and said, "Counselor, the evidence shows a clear pattern of harassment and manipulation. The restraining order is granted." My mother's temporary restraining order became permanent. Same with Keith's. Olivia's was granted with a modification that she could contact me only regarding genuine emergencies involving her children. The courtroom was silent when the judge finished. My mother looked destroyed. Keith looked furious. Olivia wouldn't meet my eyes. Outside the courthouse, my mother tried to approach me. Her lawyer held her back, whispering urgently. Rebecca guided me to my car. As I drove away, I saw my mother standing on the courthouse steps, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not guilt, not sadness, just emptiness where the obligation used to be. That night, Vanessa called. "Are you happy now?" I said. "I'm safe." She said, "You destroyed this family." I said, "No, they destroyed themselves. I just stopped letting them destroy me too." She hung up. I blocked her number. I blocked all their numbers. I changed my locks, installed security cameras, and sent a certified letter to my parents' house outlining the terms of the restraining order and requesting no further contact. The aftermath rippled through the extended family. Aunts and uncles I barely spoke to called to weigh in. Some took my family's side. "You can't just abandon your mother." Others were surprisingly supportive. "I always thought they took advantage of you." My cousin Diane called and said, "About time someone stood up to your mom. She's been a manipulator her whole life." I didn't know that. Didn't know there was a history. Diane filled me in. Family stories I'd never heard, patterns of behavior going back decades. My mother had always found someone to control, someone to serve her needs. Before me, it was my grandmother. Before that, her sister. I was just the latest in a long line of people who'd been designated the family servant. The difference was I got out. 3 months later, I got a message through a mutual friend. My mother wanted to talk, wanted to apologize, wanted reconciliation. The mutual friend, my Aunt Caroline, called and said, "She's really struggling, Nathan. She's in therapy. She realizes she was wrong." I said, "Good. I hope therapy helps her." Caroline said, "Will you talk to her?" I said, "No." Caroline sounded surprised. "You won't even give her a chance?" I said, "I gave her 4 years of chances. 4 years of hosting, funding, serving, and being used. She had plenty of chances. She chose to file a false report instead of respecting my boundary. I'm done." Caroline was quiet. Then, "She's your mother." I said, "And I'm her son." That should have meant something to her before it meant something to me. Caroline didn't call back. I spent that spring building a new life. I hosted a dinner party, just for friends. 6 people who'd always respected my boundaries, who contributed, who cleaned up after themselves, who said thank you and meant it. It was the first time in years I'd enjoyed having people in my home. Lucas brought wine. My colleague Adrian brought dessert. My neighbor Jennifer brought flowers. We ate, talked, laughed, and when they left at midnight, my house was cleaner than when they'd arrived because they'd insisted on helping. That's what respect looks like. That's what reciprocity feels like. I'd forgotten. Summer came. Father's Day passed without contact. My birthday came and went quietly. I got a card from Vanessa. No return address. Just a card that said, "I'm sorry for my part in everything. I hope you're doing well." I didn't respond, but I kept the card. It was the only acknowledgement from anyone in my family that they'd done something wrong. In July, I got an email from Dr. Reeves. She wanted to check in, see how I was doing. I met with her and told her about the restraining orders, the court hearing, the aftermath. She listened, then said, "How do you feel?" I said, "Free. Guilty about feeling free, but mostly free." She said, "The guilt is residual conditioning. It'll fade. What you did took immense courage. Most people stay trapped in toxic family dynamics their whole lives because they can't imagine anything else." August brought an unexpected development. I got a call from my father. He'd somehow gotten my new number, probably from Aunt Caroline. I should have hung up, but curiosity won. He said, "Nathan, I need to tell you something." His voice was different, quieter. I said, "What?" He said, "Your mother and I are getting a divorce." I was silent. He continued, "After everything that happened, I started looking at our marriage differently. The way she treated you, I realized she'd been doing the same thing to me for 30 years. Controlling, manipulating, making me believe I was the problem when I questioned her. I didn't know what to say. He said, "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I should have protected you. I should have seen what was happening. I chose her over you, and I was wrong." I said, "Why are you telling me this?" He said, "Because you were right, and I'm sorry." I sat with that apology for a long time after we hung up. It didn't fix anything. Didn't undo the years of enabling, the times he'd sided with her against me, the moments he'd told me to just comply. But it was something. A crack in the wall of denial that had defined my family. In September, I sold my house. Too many bad memories, too much history. I bought a smaller place across town, 2 bedrooms, cozy, just enough space for me. No dining room for hosting 16 people, no big backyard for children to destroy, just a home that was mine, with boundaries built into the architecture. The first night in the new house, I sat on my porch with a beer and felt something I hadn't felt in 5 years. Contentment. Thanksgiving, 2024. I was invited to 3 different friend gatherings. I went to Lucas's house, brought wine and a pie, stayed for 3 hours, and left feeling full and happy. No stress, no manipulation, no cleaning up after 16 ungrateful people, just friendship and genuine connection. On the drive home, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Nathan, it's Mom. I know I'm not supposed to contact you, but I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. I hope you're doing well." I stared at that message for a long time. Part of me wanted to respond. Part of me wanted to believe she'd changed. But I thought about the invoice in my dresser, the false report to social services, the years of exploitation, and I deleted the message. Some apologies come too late. Some damage can't be undone. Some relationships can't be salvaged. Christmas came. I volunteered at the homeless shelter again, same as last year. A man named Robert, maybe 60, thanked me for the meal and said, "You look happy." I said, "I am." He said, "That's good. Happy is hard to find." I thought about that. Happy is hard to find, especially when you're taught to find it through self-sacrifice and service and depletion. I'd spent years chasing my family's approval, believing that if I just hosted enough, spent enough, gave enough, they'd finally value me. But love doesn't work on a transaction basis, and family shouldn't require bankruptcy of your boundaries to prove your worth. I found happy by losing my family. That sounds tragic, but it's not. It's liberation. New Year's Eve, I threw a small party. 8 friends, good food, laughter that came easy. At midnight, we toasted to new beginnings. I didn't tell them what I was really toasting to: the end of obligation, the death of guilt, the rebirth of self-respect. I just smiled and clinked glasses and felt grateful for people who saw me as more than a venue, more than a wallet, more than a servant. In January, my father called again. He'd moved into his own apartment. He was in therapy. He wanted to know if maybe, someday, we could try to rebuild something. Not the old relationship. He knew that was gone. But maybe something new, something healthier. I told him I'd think about it. I haven't decided yet. Some doors, once closed, are hard to reopen. Some need to stay closed. It's been over a year since that Thanksgiving when I found the invoice. A year since I said no. A year since I chose myself over family obligation. People ask if I regret it, if I miss them. The honest answer is complicated. I miss the idea of family. I miss the fantasy of people who love you unconditionally and respect your boundaries and value your presence beyond what you provide. But I don't miss the reality. I don't miss the stress, the exploitation, the manipulation. I don't miss feeling like a servant in my own life. And I don't miss the person I was becoming, resentful, depleted, invisible to my own needs. That person is gone. In his place is someone who understands that the word no is a complete sentence. That boundaries aren't negotiable. That family is supposed to be a source of support, not a drain on your resources and spirit. Sometimes I drive past my old house. The new owners have kids. There's a swing set in the backyard. I wonder if they host holidays there, if their family is the kind that contributes and respects and genuinely celebrates together. I hope so. That house deserves to be filled with joy, not obligation. My therapist asked me recently what I'd say to my mother if I could say anything without consequences. I thought about it for a long time. Finally, I said, I'd tell her that she raised me to be independent and strong and capable of standing up for myself. And then I'd thank her, because those qualities are exactly what allowed me to walk away from her. Dr. Reeves smiled. That's poetic justice. Maybe it is, or maybe it's just justice. Either way, I'll take it. I've rebuilt my life on my terms. I have friends who respect me, a job I'm good at, a home that's mine, peace that's real. And every holiday season, when I'm not hosting 16 people or spending thousands of dollars or cleaning up destruction, I'm reminded that the best gift I ever gave myself was the word no. It cost me my family, but it saved my life. And given the choice again, I'd make the same decision every time, because I finally understand what my family never did. I'm not the logical choice for their needs. I'm not the designated servant. I'm not the family coordinator or the free venue or the bottomless wallet. I'm a person, and that's enough. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.